Welcome back to Lamento. I just struggled a lot to fix the OBS because there were some issues. I haven't recorded in a while, but since I don't have much backlog left, I thought it would be great to record another part. So last time I played was 11th of June. So we shall continue. While I play with my kinetic sand in the meantime to have something to do with my hands while I read. Green reflected in his field of view. The lush greenery, the smell of soil and grass brushed his nose. He looked around with uncertainty. The next thing that caught his sight were familiar azure eyes.
この絵。Asato, 大丈夫か?
Asato peered at him with an awfully worried expression. Only after that did he realize he was sprawled on the ground, lying face up. Konoe was lying in the grass in the center of the field where the lights intersected. His hands and feet felt too heavy to move and his body creaked, but he took his time and slowly sat up.
気がついたか?
Rai's voice accompanied the sound of the shaking bushes.
一体何が? 急に倒れたんだ.
Wait, the sound seems too loud. Give me 1 sec. There.
倒れた? だいぶうなされてた.
Konoe began to think, his brain finally working again. Was it a dream? No, that couldn't be. And considering that, what was this awful sense of fatigue? His hand subconsciously probed his belly. Those devils, the pain, the shock, even now the lingering memory vividly remained.
Oi.
When Rai saw Konoe, his expression suddenly became stern. His gaze moving quickly from Konoe's ears to his tail, Rai firmly grabbed hold of Konoe's arm.
どういうことだ?
Catching on, Asato's gaze was also drawn to Konoe's arm, and he frowned.
あざがなくなってる.
At these words, Konoe immediately looked at his arms. Gone. The black markings had vanished. They hadn't been a dream after all. What about his ears and tail? He held his tail up where he could see it. His pounding heart suddenly made a huge leap.
戻ってる.
His tail had returned to its original color. Konoe gave Asato and Rai a questioning
耳も
look.
戻ってるのか? ああ.
Konoe looked at his tail in disbelief for a moment, stunned. He tried wiggling the tip. It was definitely his. That was no dream, but it was too sudden, so he still didn't feel like it was real. He didn't feel happy, surprised, or relieved. He wondered if he was still dreaming even now.
呪いが消えたということか? それは...
Konoe was about to talk about what he experienced when his ears perked up and trembled. An intense chill ran over him. Asato and Rai's ears flicked up too, attentive to the sounds around them. This presence. Oh? A black flame appeared in the sky. The flame flared up, steadily forming a shadow. There was a heavy hiss of fabric slicing the air. As the figure that appeared, Konoe bared his fangs and growled.
リークス. ほう、無事に悪魔たちの闇をくぐり抜けたか。どういうことだ? どうもこうもない。奴らが失敗したということだ。
Oh. Reeks extended his hand. Flames dwelled in the 4 stones surrounding the field. Red, blue, yellow, and green. The same colors as the devils and the serpents. The 4 flames blazed above and black shadows wavered inside. It couldn't be. Konoe opened his eyes wide in shock. Verge, Raud, Karetz, and Razel. They manifested before the stones containing each flame. Neither Asato nor I moved an inch, glaring at all of them. Riksu joined the devils surrounding Konoe, and a sinister air enveloped the field.
はるか遠い昔、この場所には魔力が溢れていた。お前たちはこの場所から生まれた。
Speaking to none of them in particular, Riksu turned to gaze at the 4 devils.
結局誰の手にも落ちなかったか。残念だったな。悪魔として恐れられるお前たちの力もこの程度ということか。
Furaudo shrugged.
言い訳はしないさ。当然だ。
あの猫がそれだけ揺るぎない心を持っていた。
Razel inclined his face defiantly. Riksu turned to Razel.
代償としてお前たちの力もらい受ける。
Or
な。
The devil's complexions changed.
そんな話は聞いていない。これは契約だ。せいぜい己の失態を嘆くがいい。
横暴だな。
Riksu held his arms out again.
させるか。
Virgo brought down his hand, from which light was born. Like a flash of lightning, the light crackled in the air and speed in Leek's direction. But right before the light reached Riksu, it was extinguished. It was as if he'd erected an invisible wall. I can't even read properly, I'm sorry.
無駄だ。
Riksu's outstretched hand clasped slowly close. The 4 swaying flames behind the devils gravitated towards him.
あなたとは前々から馬が合わないと思ってたんだ。奇遇だな。私もだよ。
The devils grimaced bitterly. The 4-colored flames' tips flickered towards Riksu, drawn in little by little. Konoe could only watch, stunned. Karetsu closed his eyes and sank down to his knees, unable to take it anymore. One after the other devils collapsed as well. The 4 flames formed a small globe and settled in Riksu's hand. As if checking it, Riks clenched the globe.
受け取ったぞ。
このや。
The figures of the heavy-breathing devils became transparent.
初めからそれが目的で。さてね、目的というのであれば確かにその一つだろうな。今は力がいる。だがたとえお前たちの誰かがあの猫を落としていたとし、
Yeah.
我々は利用されたということか。人聞きが悪いな。
Riksu crooked his head mockingly.
さて、悪いがお前たちは用済みだ。そろそろ消えてもらおう。
Riksu drew his fist, clutching the globe of flame to his chest. When he opened his hand again, the globe had completely vanished. At that same moment, the transparent devils distorted strangely and instantly changed to pure white ash. The ash rained over the stunned Konoe like snow. Gazing at the sky, Rai smirked.
化け物か。
Riksu clasped his hand under the scattering ash. His masked face looked down. Intimidated, Konoe clenched his teeth. The atmosphere indicated that this was the owner of incredible power.
一体何が目的だ？俺と悪魔とどう関係がある？
Riksu didn't answer Konoe but spoke of something else.
お前はなかなか楽しませてくれそうだ。一つだけ忠告しよう。お前と深く関わる者はいずれ同じ運命をたどることになる。
どういうことだ？
さてね。では次の時までしばしの別れだ。
Okay. With a low chuckle, Riksu spread out the cloak he was wearing. The fabric fluttering, Riksu's figure was entirely concealed in a black shadow. Oh? Oh.
待て！
Crouching at the same time he shouted, Konoe leaped up high. The pain and fatigue in his body vanished. He reached his arm out, but Riksu's shadow became a blank sphere and floated even higher. He melted into the sky, which had begun to change into night. I accidentally had tapped out. I have to tap back out real quick. There we go. Because my OBS vanished. Failing to capture his target, Konoe landed on the grass. Rai and Asato rushed up to him.
逃げ足の速いやつだな。
Konoe looked up where Riksu had disappeared in the sky. His departing words rushed about in his head. You are likely to entertain me. That was what he said.
これで終わるはずがない。
With a low murmur, Konoe clenched his fists. Nothing had been settled yet. Nothing at all. The curse was broken and the devils disappeared because of Riksu. He was left not with relief or joy, but indescribable emptiness. Suddenly feeling a gaze on him, Konoe turned around. Rai was looking at Konoe with a stern expression.
気を失っている間、何があった？なぜ呪いが解けた？話せ。
The curse broken? Konoe looked at his arms. Both his ears and tail had gone back to their original color.
本当に呪いは解けたのか？
Rai looked dubious. Konoe felt doubtful. What if only his appearance had gone back to normal? His opponent was Riksu. Konoe didn't know what he was plotting. Couldn't this all be a dream? Maybe he wouldn't look normal the next day. Maybe... Suddenly, Konoe became afraid. He was seized with intense agitation and anxiety. The curse was lifted, but why? He felt dizzy. He didn't know what to believe. His own dammed-up feelings now overflowed. In a frenzy, Konoe grabbed both of Rai's arms as he stood before him.
おい。
呪いが解けたってどうしてわかる？確証はどこにもない。まだかかったままなのかもしれない。そんなのどうやったらわかるんだ？あんたは知ってるのか？どうやって？
コノエ。
Something warm touched his shoulder. Asato's hand.
今日は休んで、また明日考えればいい。この場所は良くない。移動した方がいい。
Yes. When Konoe looked back, he met Asato's gentle blue eyes. His emotions settled down a bit. Konoe shut his eyes and took a deep breath. Calm down. He couldn't think of anything else. Calm down.
ごめん。
He loosened his tight grip on Rai's arms and looked down in self-contempt. Rai said nothing but let out a small sigh.
今夜はこの森で過ごす。夜が明けたらランセンに戻るぞ。
また街中で狙われたりしたら。
そこらをふらふらさまようつもりか。リークスの口ぶりからして、すぐに仕掛けてくることはないだろ
うん。
でも、
う。今もやろうと思えばやれたはずだ。奴には奴の目論みがある。忌々しいことにな。
Indeed, that could be true. Even the devils had been killed very easily. Was their existence inconsequential to Rix? Then Rix's intentions... Konoe stopped thinking there. He didn't want to think about anything anymore.
わかった。
Before leaving the open area, Konoe looked over at the four stones. As the moon of light set, the reflections thinned and disappeared from view. The four stones fell silent. Even though they looked so spectacular at noon, they looked decrepit now. The place where devils were born had been drained of its magic. Were they really gone? No one knew. No one knew. In his heart, Konoe told himself that. A hand reached out. About to be grasped, he twisted away. Despite this, even more hands stretched out. In the darkness, he didn't know whether they were coming from the ground or not. Konoe jumped back and dashed out of their way. If he looked closely, many of the hands were cut up and bruised, the skin dark, the bone exposed. When his gaze followed the arms, he saw faces contorted in sadness. Traces of tears blackened on their cheeks. Their mouths opened to catch him. Chills running down his spine, Konoe desperately tried to escape. But suddenly his tail was caught. A shock ran through him and he almost cried out. It was an awfully cold, moist sensation. The tugging gradually became stronger. Somehow, standing his ground, Konoe looked back and gasped. 4 devils grasped Konoe's tail. All of them wore a contemptuous smile, and their eyes shone darkly. There was neither an overwhelming force nor dignity. They laughed like dolls, all with the same expression. He felt an unknown fear and struggled fiercely. Even so, the hands on his tail didn't budge. On the contrary, they came closer, like serpents. It broke off. A sound creaked from the base of his tail to his body. It hurt. It hurt, but above all, he was afraid. If his tail was torn off, would his body be ripped apart as well? He struggled desperately. Suddenly, a shadow appeared overhead. There was no light, but he felt a presence in the darkness. He looked up through his dim view while panting in pain, his tongue lolling out. Rix was laughing. Chuckling, he looked down at Konoe. His cloak swayed and he held up one hand. The striking motion was etched into his mind's eye. Heat coursed through his arms. When Konoe looked down, innumerable black markings were crawling forth, surging over him. The markings began to cover his entire body. He saw his tail out of the corner of his eye, stained jet black. He was terrified. The curse had returned. Heat. He didn't know whether it was pain in his tail or the heat of his markings. He tried to cry out, but his breath was hoarse as the burning markings coiled around his throat. Rix laughed mockingly. Was it in satisfaction or in pity? Without warning, the searing sensation of his tail being torn grew worse. No. He opened his eyes. The first thing Konoe saw was the moon of light peeking through the trees. Konoe's heart raced. It was like a painful pressure in his chest. His gaze darting left to right, he reached a hand behind his waist and felt out his tail. It wasn't torn off, so he breathed out a sigh of relief. A dream? His body suddenly tensed. What became of the markings? What color were his ears and tail? Last night, the proof of the curse disappeared. However, it could have only been temporary. It could have returned overnight. The sound of his heartbeat sped up. A cold sweat formed all over his body. He wanted to make sure, but if he had the markings, the thought made him helplessly afraid. Konoe remembered his dream. No, was it really a dream? The village cats, the devils, and Riks laughing. He remembered it clearly. Riks's calm and smiling figure nauseated him. He would never give in to him. It wasn't over. Maybe Riks was, even now, observing his fright and amusement. With this conclusion, his fear vanished instantly. Konoe breathed in slowly and stopped, then raised both hands to his face. There were no markings. He covered his face with both hands and exhaled his held breath. He was glad.
具合は平気か?
At the voice, he removed his hands from his face. Blocking the soft moonlight, Asato's eyes peered back at him. Rai sat beside him with his arms crossed.
だいぶうなされていたぞ。
耳、
耳?
俺の何色？
Asato looked like he didn't understand and then gave a small chuckle.
黒じゃない。白に少し茶色がかった色をしてる。
Chairo. So they really had gone back to normal. He sighed again. When he looked over, Konoe noticed Asato was still staring at his feet.
なんだよ。
いや、もこんな色だったのかと思って。
そうだけど。
Asato kept quiet and stared at Konoe's tail, making him frown.
アサト？
ああ、いや。
そんなに変か、俺の尻尾。
He likes it, doesn't he?
違う。元に戻ったオモ。綺麗だから。
I knew it! Of course he likes our gorgeous, gorgeous tail. I mean, who wouldn't? We are pretty. His mouth fell open and he inadvertently curled his tail up to hide it. Did Asato say such embarrassing things so boldly because he grew up in that cage called Kira, not knowing these things? Asato blinked his eyes at Konoe's reaction. Apparently, he just wasn't aware.
お前、ランセンの街とか行ってみろよ。モテるんじゃないか？
Oh, surely he would.
なぜだ?
さあ。
Asato cooked his head, genuinely curious. Rai, who had been listening to the conversation, in silence, now scoffed subtly.
なんだよ。
幼い色だな。
Konoe was offended by his condescending words.
こんな色の猫、他にいくらでもいるだろう。
他は関係ない。俺はお前の話をしている。
あんたな。
性格と見た目に合った色だ。
Rude.
この絵を悪く言うな。
事実だろ。
Asato growled at Rai, but Rai didn't appear to care at all. Konoe gave a long, drawn-out sigh as he stood up. Though some sluggishness remained, his body felt a little better.
そろそろ立つぞ。
Rai and Asato stood. Konoe fixed his clothes and followed after them.
昨日、気を失っている間に何があった？
It was while they were walking through the forest, suddenly questioned by Rai, Konoe looked up.
悪魔たちに会った。
気を失っている時にか。
夢か現実か、はっきりしない感じだった。
But it was real. Real in his mind, not his body.
本体だったのか。
あ
あ。確証は？
ない。けど、影じゃなかった。あれは絶対本体だ。
There was no mistaking it. At least, they were different from the shadows Konoe saw. As Konoe spoke with no hesitation behind his words, Rai didn't press him any further.
呪いの証が消えたことと関係があるのか？
わからない。
The markings engraved into the 4 stones looked just like the markings that appeared on his body. The 4-colored snakes and the devils were probably related as well. He felt like it all tied together somehow, but he couldn't figure it out. It just made him frustrated. He didn't know why he was being targeted. Verga had called Konoe prey. He didn't understand that either. He didn't understand anything. While he sharpened his claws to distract his mind, the green meandering scene was broken. Meandering? It was that village. They soon arrived at the desolated village where the corpse cats had walked. His heart beat like a drum for no particular reason at that thought. Naturally, there was no one in the village. He cast his eyes down at the loneliness. No corpses, no traces of blood. The village was deserted as if no one had lived here for a long time. He remembered the village cats who emerged in his dream. Even though the curse was broken, it was fact that the cats had died because of him. Although they'd been controlled by Rix's hand, Konoe had gotten them involved. Truly, they didn't need to have died. The cats of this village should have lived their days in peace. So many lives had been extinguished because of him. He was now keenly aware of that horror. His heart ached as if it might burst.
感傷に浸っている暇などないぞ。
Yaw, so cold. Walking through the village, Rai spoke without even turning around.
結果が全てだ。
He knew. This would be the outcome. Even so, Konoe walked on, putting one hand up to control his aching heart. His anger towards Rixe wasn't enough to replace his guilty conscience. Oh. By the time they returned to Ransen, the moon of light had ascended high overhead. The streets were as crowded as ever, and if Konoe got lost, he'd be swallowed up in the crowds. Although not much time had passed since they left the town, it felt like he'd been gone for an awfully long time. Konoe suddenly felt tired. Because Asato appeared to have trouble dealing with the confusion of the town, he was likely crossing the neighborhood over the rooftops. Treading down the street, Konoe noticed something unusually about the atmosphere. Strange clothes and masks were displayed in the stalls of the vendors, and he saw many uncommon confections and elaborate foods. Everywhere he looked, flags with the Ransen crest were displayed on the doors and in the windows. However, because there were also decorations with dark sigils, the colors dimmed, and it wasn't exactly cheerful. Troubadours constantly played music.
安東だな。
Anto?
アント？
ランセンで行われる示唆最大の冬の祭りだ。
Ah,
冬を悪魔に見立てて追い払うための儀式のようなものだな。
ah. It certainly was more like a ritual than a festival. If this was Hisa's greatest festival, there should be a lot of sightseers visiting from other towns and villages. In that case...
宿取れないんじゃないのか？
この間の宿へ行く。
だから、
あの宿には貸しがあるだろう。
Ah, true. Speaking of that, Konoe remembered he'd taken on the role of the receptionist until the real replacement came. Or rather, that was the role imposed on him. Bado said he could always come by again. He hadn't intended to rely on that offer, but now he had no choice.
聞いてみる。
Although he didn't feel like it, Konoe turned to head to Bado's inn with Rai. Wading through the waves of cats, they finally managed to reach the inn. Even if Asato wasn't there, Konoe felt so tired that he just went right in through the door. Unlike before, sounds of quiet chattering now resounded through the waiting room. There appeared to be several cats who were guests here now. When he looked to the reception desk, there was a striped cat running a pen along paper, tilting his head and frowning. It was Bottle.
待ってろ。
Oops. Although he answered, Bottle held up one hand to stop Konoe without lifting his face. He seemed to be lost in thought.
ああ、ここがこうだろう。で、
He's a bit silly, ain't he?
やめやめ、こんなもん。いくら悩んだって無駄だな。
Sure. Leaving the pen alone, Bottle muttered incoherently while scratching his head with one hand.
だから祭り時は嫌いなんだよ。客が多すぎてさっぱりだ。脳がよじれる前にとっとと。ん？
Bottle finally noticed Konoe standing before the counter.
誰だったか。あんたあれだ。この間留守を頼んだ。なんだ。
はい。
くぬぎ？
No.
この絵。
Close enough.
そうだ、それ。この間悪かったな。で、今日はなんだ？泊まりに来たのか？
Actually, yes. What else would you came for? What else would you come to an inn for? Konoe wondered. When he nodded, Bottle grinned proudly for some reason.
だから言っただろう。祭りの時期は大変だって。もともとランセンは死者最大のくせに宿があんまりないからな。
True.
で、泊まってくのか？
はい。
もし部屋が空いてたら泊めてほしいんだけど。
ああ、さっきちょうどキャンセルが出たところなんだ。あんた一人か？それは
？3匹だ。今はここにいないやつが1匹と、俺と。
He turned in Rai's direction and was startled. Rai bared his fangs and fluffed out his already fluffy tail, growling. The cats surrounding him moved away from the bloodthirst emanating from him. His usually calm blue eyes had drawn to a slit filled with a ferocious light. Konoe had never seen him like this before.
おい。
なぜ貴様がここにいる？
Who? Amidst the growling was a low voice unmistakably directed at Bottle. Huh? Konoe looked to Bottle. Not looking particularly surprised, Bottle crossed his arms rarely and watched Rai. His posture was surprising to Konoe as well.
なぜってそりゃ、ここは俺の宿だからな。いない方がおかしいだろ。それより久しぶりだってのに随分な挨拶だな。
黙れ。
What's their backstory?
コノエの連れだったのか。世界は狭いな。
Did the two know each other? Konoe stared at the two in blank amazement. Bottle rested his elbows on the counter and grinned uncomfortably.
あの悪い癖、まだ治ってないの。
Just then, white light flashed. Next came the heavy sounds of a sharp wind against a gust of air. Not knowing what happened, Konoe followed the flow of that wind with his gaze. A dagger was stuck on the counter. Its tip was right before Bottle's eyes as he rested his elbows on the counter. Bottle didn't waver, casting Rai an upward gaze.
暴れるな。他の客に迷惑だろ。
おい、行くぞ。
Appearing to be holding back his anger, Rai spoke roughly. Still resting against the counter, Bottle flicked the dagger with a finger.
他はどこもいっぱいだ。別に取って食うわけでもなし。顔を見たくなけりゃ、受付の前通るときは目つぶってりゃいいだろう。そうカッカするなよ。頭に血が上りやすい猫は早死にするぞ。
Brash cats die young. These exact same words had come from Rai before as well. Just what kind of relationship did these two have? Konoe looked up at Rai's face.
少し落ち着けよ。
なんだと。
あんたの事情はどうでもいい。けど、俺は俺の貸しを返してもらう。だから、ここに泊まる。他へ行きたいなら、あんた一人で行ってくれ。
Rai glared at Konoe, a dim flame of resentment running between them. Was he opposed? It was as he said. Konoe pursed his lips and glared straight back at Rai. Honestly, the force was enough to make him want to flinch, but he pushed back his timidity. In fact, he didn't particularly mind sleeping outside, in the grass or on the ground. Wherever was fine as long as he could rest. But right now, he wanted to show this cat that he couldn't always just get whatever he wanted. The Sangha supported the Toga until the bitter end, but not as the Toga's slave. For a while, the standoff continued. The air was so tense that it frightened guests out of the inn. Only Bado would occasionally flick the dagger stuck in the counter, wrapping it with his claws. Sweat formed in Kono's clenched fists. At times like this, the power of Rai's eye was truly intense. He kept a sharp gaze on him, feeling like he'd stuck his tail in a fire. Finally, Rai blew a sigh and lowered his eyelid. It seemed like they'd regained their composure after glaring at one another. For what, like an hour? Konoe thought. He and Rai weren't friends. At most, they were together for each other's interests. It wouldn't be so odd even if they separated.
知らん。勝手にしろ。
So, would they finally part ways here? But the very next moment, Konoe opened his eyes wide. He thought that Rai was going to leave, but that Rai was heading up to the second floor. Following Rai in a hurry, Konoe looked over his shoulder to the counter.
はいはい、どうぞごゆっくり。
He raised one hand lightly while the other rested on the counter. Feeling surprised at this attitude which lacked any clear motives, Konoe turned to the stairs.
おい、忘れ物。
I forgot. Bado threw something at him. Konoe, completely distracted by Rai, tried to reflexively catch what was thrown at him, but he immediately bristled up and jumped back. Konoe heard a dull sound. Bado gave him an easygoing smile. He'd thrown Rai's dagger. Until a few moments ago, it had been stuck in the counter and now it pierced the floor where Konoe had just been standing. He heard a metallic sound, and when he looked up, he saw two keys hooked on the crossguard. They were probably their rune keys. But that wasn't the issue right now. All of Konoe's blood drained to his feet.
あんたな。
When Konoe instinctively growled, Bado laughed and fluttered one hand in a wave.
あんたなら必ず避けてくれると信じてたよ。
Did you?
その信用はどこから生まれたんだ。
フィーリング。
Feeling!
万が一ってこと考えないのか。
人生何事も前向きに考えないと楽しくないだろう。悪いことは後だ後。
I mean, I guess. He didn't know what happened in their past, but this guy could truly anger Rai. When Konoe looked closer, Bado had a strong build from working as the innkeeper. Past his indignation, he also felt an appealing sense of weakness, and Konoe drew Rai's dagger and dragged his feet upstairs.
あ、そうだ。3匹だろ。部屋は右側奥の2部屋だ。今それしか空いてない。まあどっちかに2匹入るなりして我慢してくれ。
That's fine. Bado's voice sounded from behind him. The guests turned down their ears and watched the whole event from a distance, shaking with fright. I think that's a good end.